It's noon Thursday, June 5th here in Korea. Thanks for tuning in live from Seoul. I'm Ju.
Very good to have you with us. I'm Mark Broom. And where else could we start but with the results of yesterday's local elections? All of the 17 major mayoral and provincial governor races have now been called one way or the other.
For a breakdown of all the results, we connect to our Park Ji-won at the News Center. So, Ji-won, the vote count continued well into the early hours of this morning, but we now have a clear picture of the new political landscape.
Good afternoon, Jinju and Mark. Yes, the final results for the 17 heads of local governments show the ruling Saenuri Party was victorious in 8 regions, mainly in its traditional strongholds in the southeast of the country and Korea's most heavily populated Gyeonggi-do Province. The main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy won 9 regions, including Seoul and its stronghold regions in the southwest. Breaking down the results by regions, the ruling party fared pretty well in the metropolitan area, although Seoul was taken by the main opposition. The party won the hotly contested Incheon mayoral seat in Gyeonggi-do Province. However, the main opposition party claimed victories in the nation's central regions, the Chungcheongbuk-do provinces, the country's new administrative city of Sejong, and the central city of Daejeon. And considering these regions are traditionally moderate conservative, the main opposition party will be buoyed by its strong showing. And turning now to the southwest and southeast regions, although regions like liberals' power-based Gwangju and the southern port city of Busan had seen some strong performances by rival party candidates or independent candidates, would that lead up to the elections? The regions didn't veer from their traditional preferences. So now we can say both parties achieved half victories according to regions.
Yeah, it certainly looks like a kind of draw when you look at the map there. And Ji-won, some regions have gathered extra attention, as they always do, due to their political significance. We're talking about Seoul, for example, but there's also hotly contested races there as well. Tell us more about them.
Sure. As for Seoul, incumbent Seoul Mayor Park Won-soon from the main opposition party easily beat his ruling party rival, billionaire politician Chung Mong-jun. Park's victory comes in the wake of the deadly ferry disaster last month, and let's listen to what the competing candidates had to say after the confirmation of the results.
This is a victory of all citizens who called for a fundamental change following the Seoul ferry disaster. It's a victory for all citizens who work honestly. Now I will silently work towards a new era.
I want to thank the citizens of Seoul. I humbly accept the choice of the people. I hope Mayor-elect Park will newly lead Seoul City by taking on the difficult situation facing the city.
Now, Ji-won, we saw very tight races in Gyeonggi-do Province and Gangwon-do Province. These were the last 2 provinces to confirm the winners.
Yes, Jinju. In Gyeonggi-do Province, the ruling party's Nam Kyung-pil edged to victory against his rival Kim Jin-pyo by less than 1 percentage point. In Korea's eastern Gangwon-do Province, incumbent Governor Choi Mun-soon also scored a tight win. The gap there less than 2 percentage points.
Yes, very close races there. Now, it wasn't just politicians in the running at these local elections. The public also had to vote for their regional education chiefs as well. Give us the latest results there.
Yes, 17 education chiefs, 1 for each region, were also elected. And surprisingly, 13 out of the 17 winners can be considered progressive in their political leaning. For example, Seoul's new education superintendent, Yoo Li-an, a liberal professor, beat 2 other strong conservative candidates. Some pundits say the result reflects the anger of voters in their 40s, the generation who felt the most grief due to Seoul ferry disaster, in which so many teenage students lost their lives. Analysts say it was a push to change Korea's educational system. Well, that's all I have for now, and back to you guys in the studio.
Thank you, Ji-won. Now, turnout for Wednesday's local elections was the highest since the first local elections were held in Korea in 1995. The National Election Commission attributed this to the adoption of an early voting system.
Voter turnout, however, still fell short of the expected 60%. Yoo Li-an reports.
A total of 56.8% of eligible voters took part in this local election, making it the second highest participation rate in the past 5 local elections. Breaking it down by the most contested regions, Gangwon-do, Chungcheongbuk-do, and Chungcheongnam-do saw a relatively high voter turnout ranging from 55 to 62%. Cities of Daejeon and Busan was at 54 and 55.6% respectively. In the capital region, Incheon and the populous Gyeonggi-do Province saw turnouts fall on the lower side, both at around 53%, while in the capital city of Seoul, it was just above the average at 58.6%.
The voter turnout increased because of the early voting system that allowed people to vote anywhere, regardless of their home address.
The early voting system was adopted for the first time ever last week, and it saw a higher than expected voter turnout of 11.5%. Kim says many people took advantage of the early voting system so they could plan trips on election day. But the 56.8% voter turnout still fell short of the widely anticipated 60% rate. Some pundits had predicted the Seoul affair disaster to pull up voter participation rates given recent anti-government sentiment, but it seems it has only worked to turn voters away from politics. Yoo Li-an, Arirang News.
The presidential office of Chungcheongbuk-do says it humbly accepts the will of the people as reflected in the local election results. Presidential office spokesperson Min Kyung-wook said Thursday that the administration would do its best to honor the collective voice of the Korean public and bring about reforms to the nation. The comments echo remarks made by President Park Geun-hye last month when she vowed to fundamentally overhaul the public service sector and root out abnormal practices in society following the Seoul ferry disaster.
And now, for an expert's take on the local election results, we have Professor Kim Eun-mi, Dean of the Graduate School of International Studies at Ewha Women's University, joining us on the line. Good afternoon to you, Professor Kim.
Hello.
Many pundits have predicted that the government's poor handling of the Seoul ferry disaster could have cost the ruling party big in the local elections, but with the exception of the education chief post, the party didn't fare that badly. How do you explain that?
I think they're very concerned about not changing the captain of the ship when it's sinking or having deep problems. So I think they've given a second chance to President Park. But as you have seen from the opposition party doing fairly well in some local elections as well as in the education post, it's really a check and balance. The people are going to have a very strong check and balance mandate.
And Professor Kim, what's next for President Park Geun-hye now? Many analysts are saying that this result will give her the freedom now to press ahead with her envisioned public sector reforms.
I think she has 3 very daunting, difficult tasks, and I don't think the election results give her a full hand on the things that she wants to do. I think this is a very check and balance mechanism that's set in place. So the 3 challenges that she must do task is first, overhaul her cabinet, including nominating the prime minister and so on. And this really will be a litmus test for the people to see that that she is listening to the public, communicating with the opposition, and embracing perhaps the opposition as well. Because if she wants to overhaul the second mandate, which is to overhaul the national governance, it can be done by one party alone. It has to be a bipartisan effort. So reaching out to the other party, and it would be very critical. The third is she needs to show in the vacuum what her vision is and policy direction is. And I think these 3 are big challenges, and it's not easy.
Definitely a lot of challenges ahead of her. And by-elections are coming up at the end of July, and they'll serve as the next barometer of public sentiment toward the current administration. What tasks lay ahead of the rival parties to claim victory in that election?
I think people are already calling the July election as the mini National Assembly election, and because this election that happened yesterday did not give a clear victory to either party, the next election is going to be much more important. They have to focus on their vision and policy objectives. This election was very unusual in the sense that because of the Seoul ferry accident, they're not able to show off their candidates and do a massive campaign about their policies. It became much too late and then focused on individuals rather than policies. So the next election, I think each party has to show who their next candidates are and their policies.
Yes, both parties have a lot of challenges to come in the next few weeks. Thank you very much, Professor Kim, for your time this afternoon.
My pleasure.
That was Professor Kim Eun-mi from Ewha Women's University on the local election results.
In politics, it's never too early to look ahead to the next election. The next big one here in Korea comes in 2017, when the nation will choose its next president.
And Wednesday's local election results will have provided some hints about who might appear on the ballot. Na Hyung-kyung reports.
Incumbent Seoul Mayor Park Won-soon's landslide victory has set the fates of two political big shots on opposite courses. Although Mayor Park has made it clear he has no intention to run in the next presidential race, some say the main opposition party may not have any better options when 2017 comes around.
The second phase of Park Won-soon's administrative policies will focus on integration. I will move in step with my supporters as well as with my opponents.
Speaking of opponents, Park's competitor and seven-term lawmaker Chung Mong-jun was defeated, a first in his 26-year political career, losing momentum toward becoming the ruling party's next presidential candidate. The beneficiary of his loss just may be Gyeonggi-do Governor-elect Nam Kyung-pil, who now rises near the top of the list of possible ruling party candidates in the 2017 race.
This will be done with President Park Geun-hye and the residents of Gyeonggi-do. I will give my all for renovating this province and Korea.
Another name being tossed around from the ruling party is Jeju Island Governor-elect Won Hee-ryong. Won along with Nam are seen as young politicians who will help the ruling party transition from its older generation base. As for the main opposition party, Chungcheongnam-do Governor re-elect An Hee-jung is garnering attention. After serving time in jail for accepting illegal funds in the 2002 presidential race, An, one of late President Roh Moo-hyun's closest confidants, won the Chungcheongnam-do governor seat in 2010. Na Hyun-kyung, Arirang News.
Stay up to date on the latest news out of Korea. Connecting to our team of reporters about the issues that matter to Korea. On air, on your mobile, online. Find out more about Korea on NEWSLINE at Noon with Mark Broom and Jin-ju.
I'm Jin-ju with 12.
Market researcher, strategy analytics said Thursday that LG Electronics brought in about...
Now moving on to some other news, the European Union says it's deeply concerned about North Korea's threat of a new nuclear test. The statement came out at a meeting of the UN International Atomic Energy Agency on Wednesday. The EU also said Pyongyang may be enhancing its nuclear ability. This comes as North Korea is seen through satellite imagery to have stepped up activity at its main test site. North Korea threatened to conduct a fourth nuclear test earlier this year to counter what it called U.S. provocations in Asia. The new head of a U.S. organization that promotes relations with Asia says North Korea's nuclear program and humanitarian aid should be dealt with as separate issues. Frank Zanuzzi, president of the Marine and Mike Mansfield Foundation, said that people-centered diplomacy through informal meetings is the key to approaching Pyongyang at this point. He also said he's not optimistic about a swift resumption of the six-party talks on the North's nuclear program, adding that Pyongyang does not seem to be open to negotiations. Zanuzzi was a key member of President Obama's first presidential campaign team, serving as the director for policies related to the Korean Peninsula. And dozens of American companies have apparently been doing business with North Korea, this despite strict U.S. sanctions on the regime. Bloomberg reported Wednesday that 68 companies enlisted the central bank of the DPRK as being in their supply chain in filings with the Securities and Exchange Commission. IBM and Hewlett-Packard were among those mentioned. A spokesperson for Hewlett-Packard said investigations have been underway since January to determine whether its products contain North Korean minerals, but said none have been detected yet. IBM's filing said its products may use gold processed in the north.
Now turning to some domestic economic news. Concerned about the pronounced effect of last month's ferry disaster and an effect it's had on the domestic economy, Korea's finance minister is calling on the business community here in Korea to advance investment and employment. At a meeting with local business leaders on Thursday, Hyun-oh-sok said Korea's economy was on a moderate recovery track, but he expressed some deep concern about the prolonged impact of the ferry sinking on the service sector, but also consumption. Later this month, the Finance Ministry will announce its economic policy direction plans for the second half of the year. They're going to focus on raising the country's potential growth rate. Now, although the overall Korean economy continues on the path of a moderate recovery, as we mentioned there, gross national income is not keeping pace. Last quarter's figure did climb, but it did so at its slowest rate in 2 years. Hwang Jie explains why.
The Bank of Korea said Thursday that the nation's gross national income rose a mere 0.5% in the first quarter from the previous one, the slowest pace of expansion in 2 years. While the gauge of the population's purchasing power faced slower growth, the domestic economy managed to keep up with its recovery pace. Korea's gross domestic product grew 0.9% in the January to March period from a quarter earlier. That matches up with the growth of around 1% that the economy has posted over recent quarters. The central bank attributed the gap between gross national income and gross domestic product to shrinking dividend earned by Korean companies from their investments overseas. Experts say, however, the trend of income falling short of domestic economic activities helped worsen economic sentiment of the nation's household. They add that while Korea continues to create a relatively high number of jobs, the quality of jobs hasn't improved. From a year earlier, Asia's fourth largest economy grew 3.9% in the first 3 months of this year, accelerating from 3.7% growth in the fourth quarter last year. The central bank expects the domestic economy to grow 4% for all of this year. Hwang Jie, Arirang News.
Now staying with economic news, and Korea has reached an agreement with China to boost their bilateral ties. The two countries' finance ministers vowed to strengthen cooperation within international organizations. Seoul's finance minister, Hyun-oh-sok, shook hands on the deal Wednesday with China's finance minister, Lo Ji-wei, in Beijing. The two ministers said their enhanced bilateral cooperation will first be seen at the APEC meetings and then at the ASEAN +3 meetings. Beijing is set to hold the APEC finance ministers meeting this October. Time now for a look through the international headlines we're following at this hour. For that, we connect to our Eunice Kim standing by for us at the News Center.
Eunice, the 25th anniversary of the Tiananmen Square massacre came and went, and it looks like Chinese authorities did a solid job keeping the occasion under wraps.
That's right, but there was one memorial that brought out tens of thousands of people in remembrance, and that was in China's special administrative region of Hong Kong. Connie Lee takes you there.
A massive candlelight vigil lit up the night sky Wednesday night in a downtown park in Hong Kong. Tens of thousands of people remembered the bloody crackdown on democracy in Beijing's Tiananmen Square exactly 25 years ago in 1989. The demonstrators, including many who flew in from mainland China, called on Beijing to admit to the killings and account for what happened.
This is my first time participating in this sort of large-scale political event. I hope one day in China, citizens will truly have the freedom to demonstrate.
Although the former British colony, Hong Kong, has been under Chinese rule since 1997, it still enjoys civil liberties not allowed in mainland China today. Leading up to the anniversary, the Chinese government cracked down heavily on any mention of the massacre, prohibiting public discussion and censoring online references.
This is, of course, the 25th anniversary of Tiananmen Square crackdown. And what we've seen this year is an intensification of the crackdown against all sorts of people in civil society. And it's really wide in scope. It's not just confined to Beijing, it's nationwide.
In Beijing, dozens of activists were detained for attempting to commemorate the anniversary, and tourists and journalists in Tiananmen Square were searched. It was back in 1989, on June 4th, when hundreds of pro-democracy activists were removed by force and killed for protesting in the busy city square. Connie Lee, Arirang News.
Turning to other news now, Syria's President Bashar al-Assad has secured his third 7-year term as the leader of the war-ridden nation. Parliamentary Speaker Mohammed al-Laham announced al-Assad claimed a lion's share of the vote, nearly 89% cast only in regime-controlled parts of the country. The Constitutional Court there said turnout of the elections, widely seen as a sham, exceeded 73%. This as a 3-year civil war rages on against his rule. A network of the opposition, the local coordination committees in Syria, said at least 24 people were killed in election day violence. Diplomacy is at high gear in Brussels this week as heads of G7 nations will resume their 2-day summit today to find an exit out of the crisis in Ukraine. They issued a joint statement following their dinner discussions Wednesday, condemning Russia for its intervention in Ukraine and warned of additional targeted economic sanctions should Moscow fail to do its part to dial back violence. Also yesterday, U.S. President Barack Obama met with Kiev's incoming President Petro Poroshenko. Obama said he was deeply impressed by Poroshenko's vision for his country and pledged to stand with him. The leaders are set to cross paths with Russian President Vladimir Putin at D-Day celebrations in Normandy on Friday.
Good afternoon, I'm Yoo Li-an with your weather updates. Well, it's much cooler today. Highs are hovering in the low 20s in the eastern regions, while the capital area will see the top temperatures in the mid-20s at 26 degrees Celsius, which is a couple of degrees lower than yesterday. So I'd say today's forecast calls for a mix of sun, clouds and rain. Yes, showers are still falling over regions in the east where 5 to 20 millimeters of precipitation is expected throughout the day. So due to the clouds and rain, temperatures are staying on the cool side. But it seems like we won't get much relief from the heat. The high will soar to 30 degrees Celsius again tomorrow here in the capital. So Memorial Day is going to be a hot one, and temperatures will continue to stay on the warm side throughout the weekend. With that in mind, let's take a closer look at the readings for today. The afternoon high in the capital will rise to 26, while Daegu tops out at 22, and Gwangju and Busan should climb to 24 and 20 later on. Now for other regions, it looks like down on Jeju should see a high of 23. Daejeon and Dokdo will reach 25 and 19, while Mangkeugang tops out at 14. Well, if you have planned to be outdoor this weekend, be sure to gear up with sunproof accessories and dress lighter. That's all for me today, but I'll be back with more updates Monday morning. And it's time to take a look at the international weather for viewers around the world.
And those are the stories we're following at this hour.
Mark and I'll be back at the same time on Monday. Thank you for watching.